Welcome, Mr. President. So good to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep standing as we would like to open with our national anthem. Please take your seats. To the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, to the brand new Deputy President of South Africa, Mr. Paul Mashatile, to the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, His Excellency Mr. Wamkele Mene, Honorable Ministers, government officials, ambassadors, high commissioners, CEOs of local and international companies, members of parliament, international guests and dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, both here at the Sandton Convention Center, but also everywhere around the world, around the country, in offices and homes that are joining us on this live broadcast being hosted by the South African Broadcasting Corporation and also all of our online platforms today. You are all very welcome. Good morning, Sanbonani Goeie Môre. I'd like to give you a warm welcome, a very warm welcome to the 2023 South Africa Investment Conference. My name is Andile Khumalo, and I am a co-host today with the indelible Tami Nkadibeng in making sure that we round up the past 5 years with a bang and we begin the next 5-year journey on how we can, notwithstanding the challenges, find a way to increase investment into our beautiful country. Tami and I's job today is to help you hold your hand and make sure that you get as much out of today as possible. We also have a program that allows for a lot of room and space for you to connect with old friends. I know that with business being so hard in the past few years, we may not have had a time just to sit and have some coffee. Trust me, there's enough time for all of that today. As you all know, it's been 5 years since President Ramaphosa first announced back in April 2018 his intention to host this investment conference to try and engage both domestic and foreign investors on the opportunities that exist in the country, report on the actual commitments made, and provide a platform for would-be investors to seek out opportunities. Obviously, this has been a collaboration between all departments, the Department of Trade and Industry, the Invest SA team, of course, the presidency as well, and all other facets of government have been working together to get this sought-after day every year where we can get some pledges and then also, of course, track how much of it is invested and how much ground is broken. We've established ourselves as the key investor calendar. I know many people fight to be here, so it's so good to see such a packed room here at the Sandton Convention Center. I had a quick look at some of the stats, Mr. President, of people that have logged in, both locally and around the world, and we are really looking good. So there's great interest in what we put together. However, given that this is the fifth and final year of this first round, we all know that the target was 1.2 trillion rands, 1.2 trillion rands in the 5 years. At the time, Mr. President, I remember reading many newspaper articles saying that it was very ambitious. So we are all waiting with bated breath on how did we do, because this is the final exam. Okay, this is the only time we can move on to the next grade. So we look forward to seeing how we have done in that respect. And other than the pledges, we also want to know how much has actually been invested, how much ground has actually been broken, what kind of opportunities does that present to our people in terms of just creating and sustaining livelihoods, notwithstanding the difficulty we've had, of course, recently with the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, Tammy and I look forward to hosting a frank and candid conference today, but also one that looks beyond the challenges and tries to focus on the opportunities that these challenges present to us all. A couple of housekeeping rules, very simple rules. Please put your phones on silent. I know that investors cannot switch off their phones, Mr. President, so silent will work for me, okay? If you just need to click yes, I'm adding another billion rands to South Africa, I need to make sure your phone is on. So you need not switch it off, just please keep it on silent for me though. The bathrooms are all over this venue, I'm pretty sure you've seen them already. There is no smoking allowed in this venue, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to do so, there are designated areas on the outside for that. We do have free Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi name is Southern Sun. And for those that do share on social media like myself and Tommy, the hashtag is SAIC2023, SAIC2023, which of course stands for the South Africa Investment Conference. But we'd also like you to tag Invest SA, our one-stop shop when it comes to attracting and facilitating investment in South Africa. Let me take you through what the program looks like. We've got a plenary session here for most parts of the morning. We're going to be hearing from business leaders, ministers, and even the president himself. And then we're going to get into a panel discussion right here in this room before we open up the day. So after our tea break, we're going to open up the day. There's venues all over this place, the Sandton Convention Center, particularly in level 2, where you'll be able to go to various different panel discussions. Please have a look at the program. If you haven't yet done so, please download the event app, because that will help you to see where perhaps you would like to go and be able to participate in those discussions that will be happening there. Also, don't forget that on the ground level, where you entered this venue, when you got here, there is a huge exhibition. I took a walk through last night, and please make sure you make the time to go there, grab a cup of coffee, walk around, go and visit all of the companies that are doing amazing things in this country that are all exhibiting down there. And I'd like to thank all of the companies, all of our sponsors that have made today possible. In fact, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So after that action-packed day, we are all going to be meeting back here for a gala dinner later on. So we're going to start here in the morning, we're going to go to level 2 when we're doing the breakaways, and in the evening we're back in this venue where we will be doing our gala dinner. So please be prepared for that. There's great talent that will be on stage. There's some awards as well, a couple of surprise awards that will be given to some companies doing great things in our country that have been part of this journey, and some that have benefited actually from the foreign direct investment and local investment that many of you guys are responsible for. Right, I would now like to kick things off and to bring on stage a gentleman that certainly in my time working in the media, I've always felt and believed and got the impression that this is probably one of the hardest working ministers. And if I doubted that, last night we had a dry run, as one does with these events, and we thought it was over, I got a call from the team to come back and meet the minister. And we went through the program yet again. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Minister of Trade and Investment, Minister Ibrahim Patel. It's a long walk, Minister, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Good man.
On behalf of the South African government, I wish to warmly welcome you at this 5th South African Investment Conference. I want to welcome all of you, all 1,300 delegates from across South Africa and the world. I want to welcome the President, the Deputy President, members of Cabinet who are present, premiers from most of our provinces, including our host Premier, members of Parliament, mayors, economic regulators, and government officials. I want to welcome the more than 200 international delegates from 40 countries across the world who flew in for this conference. And they include investors from 10 other African countries. To you, our visitors from other parts of the world, a special welcome to Gauteng, the economic powerhouse of the African continent, where 35% of South Africa's wealth is generated. The small but productive province that accounts for 5% of the African continent's GDP. We welcome small businesses who provide the important services to our community, and large businesses who employ millions of citizens. The 100+ black industrialists present here today, the 70 representatives from financial institutions and investment funds, the worker and community delegates, the manufacturers, the producers of energy, the miners, the filmmakers. We welcome the large contingent of exporting firms present. Last year, South Africa achieved a record performance, exporting 2 trillion rands worth of goods, representing almost 1/3 of our GDP. We want all of your money to be invested, to build new factories, to expand mines, to develop more agricultural lands, to obtain machinery, and to employ young South Africans. I welcome the ambassadors and the high commissioners present from a number of partner countries. A special welcome also to the Secretary General of the AFC, of the AFCFTA, and to the leadership of the African Development Bank. Today marks the end of one stage of a journey that started, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, on Monday morning on 16 April 2018. On that day, beautiful as an early autumn day is in Johannesburg, President Ramaphosa announced that he had set a target for South Africa to raise 1.2 trillion rand in commitments to fixed investment. This would be done through the dedicated efforts of a team that included new investment envoys, and the result of those efforts would be announced at annual investment conferences. The target was to be achieved over a period of 5 years. On that day, just 1,800 days ago, the world appeared simpler, less volatile, less uncertain, friendlier. We could not anticipate that in the next 5 years we would face unprecedented challenges. First, that the world would experience the biggest global pandemic since 1918, with a virus that would cause millions of deaths worldwide, shut down businesses, profoundly disrupt supply chains, and lead to the sharpest recession since the end of the Second World War. Second, that following an election in the United States, supporters of the losing candidate would attempt an insurrection and try to take control of the United States Capitol building. And just 6 months later, South Africa would face the largest unrest since the start of the democracy, following an ex-president being sent to jail, with damage to physical and commercial infrastructure and loss of lives. Third, that the dangers of climate change would show themselves in the largest floods in living memory on South Africa's eastern seaboard, washing away lives, livelihoods, housing, and parts of our main freight goods train artery. And this would take place in the same year that temperatures reached record highs in other parts of the world. And fourth, that global geopolitical tensions would be significantly heightened, with sharp tensions in the South China Sea, greater polarization, and a war in the heart of Europe that would impact across the world through a sharp rise in fuel and food prices and the threat of nuclear war. Okay, I know you all would want a less eventful next 5 years. I mention these events because, though unanticipated at the time when the President put this goal to us, we had to navigate this landscape in our efforts to reach the 1.2 trillion rand target. And we did so also faced with debilitating and sharp energy shortages. Spoiler alert, later this morning we will find out whether we've met that target, and if so, by what margin. At today's meeting, the President will address us by providing a set of priorities, things that we are doing and we will be doing in the period ahead. And to complement the President's remarks, we will flight a documentary-type video of progress made in different projects. People reporting back, highlighting what companies have done since the pledges were made. This conference, friends, ladies and gentlemen, is the first public in-person engagement of the Cabinet delegation with investors since a number of new Cabinet members were appointed by the President. We'll host panel discussions on a range of issues relevant to investors and to policymakers. And we'll have a plenary session on the great opportunity of the African market that can be unlocked through the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is our pivot to African-led growth. Within a few hours, a number of pledges will be made by investors for new investment in the South African economy. Pledges that will focus on sectors that drive innovation. Pledges that will seek to plug the gap in South Africa's energy supply through building and supplying new sources of energy. Announcements from manufacturing industries, from mining, from telecommunications, from food producers. Pledges from firms in special economic zones and from investors drawn from other African countries. And pledges from development finance institutions and funding agencies. This conference highlights South African resilience and the productive engines that investments create, that creates jobs in turn. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as the inspiration behind the investment conferences and as the author of that investment target on that day in 2018, it is now my pleasure to welcome the President of the Republic, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa. I call on His Excellency to officially open this conference and give the keynote address. Mr. President, you are welcome to come up. The floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the President.
Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program directors, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Paul Mashatile, Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Minister Ibrahim Patel, ministers and deputy ministers who are here in large numbers, which we are grateful for, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Mr. Wamkele Mene, our premiers who are also here from various provinces in large numbers, the Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, ambassadors, high commissioners, business leaders, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm really pleased to welcome you all here to this 5th South Africa Investment Conference. Your presence and participation at this investment conference is a clear demonstration that South Africa continues to be an attractive investment destination despite a strained domestic and global economic climate. The South African Investment Conference has continued to evolve and to grow over the past 5 years, as you heard from Minister Patel. In 2018, we set a bold and what other people call ambitious target to raise 1.2 trillion rand in investment over a 5-year period. this year's conference is an opportunity to reflect on the progress that we have made to achieve that goal. Given the state of the economy in 2018, and given that we were emerging from a decade of state capture, many thought it was an unattainable target. We moved with speed, appointing the first of our special envoys. A number of them are here with us today, and we'll talk about them later, to engage with domestic and foreign investors on investment opportunities in South Africa. In the same year, the first ever South African Investment Conference took place. Despite economic headwinds, low business confidence, and dampened investor sentiment, the first conference generated investment pledges to a value approximating 300 billion rand. The value of investment pledges has continued to grow over the past 5 years. Since 2018, we have had to contend with a devastating global pandemic, damaging social unrest, several natural disasters, and a cost of living crisis, which has been worsened by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. In addition, we are now confronted with the consequences of years of underinvestment, mismanagement, and corruption in our electricity, rail, and logistics sectors. Given all that has taken place in the intervening years, it is understandable that investor confidence has been sorely tested. Doubters, and there have been many, have had reason to be skeptical. We are on a long journey to rebuild our country. We are on a journey to recover the ground that we have lost, despite all the challenges and difficulties we've had. Our recovery is a mission that will take time to accomplish. We are on the recovery path, and we refuse to be daunted by the challenges that we face. We are confident that we will recover. We remain convinced that South Africa is an investment destination with significant untapped potential. And we are glad that many do see this untapped potential, and hence the presence of many of you here. We do believe that by leveraging our unique value proposition as a country and as a nation, we have the ability to attract higher levels of investment. In the midst of all the challenges we face, our ambition has not been misplaced. We do believe that the target we set in 2018 was also not misplaced either. The 4 investment conferences that have taken place to date have attracted 1.14 trillion rand in investment pledges. We expect that the investment announcements made here today will take this total beyond the target that we set 5 years ago. You watch this space today, and you will see how we will go beyond what we achieved in 4 years. While investment decisions often take several years to reach fruition, the investment commitments made to date have already resulted in substantial investment in the productive economy of our country. Almost 70% of the total number of projects announced since 2018 are either completed or on their way to completion. To date, approximately 460 billion of capital has been invested in new building factories, purchasing equipment, constructing roads, sinking mine shafts, and rolling out broadband infrastructure. What really stands out is the impact of these investments on the lives of South Africans who are now able to earn a decent living and care for their families. And the investments have spanned across all our 9 provinces, and they've covered 22 districts in our country, and a number of them have been at national level. Beyond the pledges made inside this conference hall, I've been encouraged by the investments that are happening in our economy and those that are being facilitated via Invest SA, our investment envoys who have been hard at work, our diplomatic missions, a number of whom are here today, our government departments, and especially the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Whether it is in business process outsourcing, tech startups, the automotive sector, green ammonia, green hydrogen, or in the construction of mega data centers, local and international companies are expanding their footprint in South Africa. Hence, we have almost 40 countries represented here today. It has been a core conviction of this administration that I lead that to create jobs, we must drive growth. And to achieve growth, we must implement fundamental economic reforms. This 5th South African Investment Conference affirms local and international investor confidence in the structural reforms we've been driving to improve the business environment. Together, working with business and various other stakeholders, we identified the need for reforms that needed to be effected to move our economy forward. We have been busy at that. Some have been rather slow, some have been done on time, but we are moving forward. The energy sector remains our foremost priority. The lack of reliable energy supply weakens business and consumer confidence, but it also taints international perceptions about our country and affects investment sentiments and decisions. With a view to addressing the energy challenges that our country faces, we announced an energy action plan in July of last year. The Energy Action Plan presents a clear path to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding, of blackouts as other people call it, in the short term and achieve energy security in the long term. The Minister in the Presidency for Electricity, whom I appointed recently, with the support of the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy and the Minister of Public Enterprises, as well as the National Energy Crisis Committee, which resides in the Presidency, is overseeing the implementation of this plan. Our immediate focus is on improving the performance of our existing coal-fired power stations as they continue to provide the base load of our energy, including one nuclear energy power station. Demand-side management initiatives will receive elevated attention, including through consumer behavior, rooftop solar and facilitating embedded generation. We have been implementing wide-ranging reforms in the electricity sector to enable private investment in electricity generation and also to accelerate the procurement of new generation capacity from solar, wind, gas, and battery storage. One of these reforms regarding the removal of the licensing threshold for embedded generation has facilitated considerable private sector investment in the electricity sector that runs into billions and billions of rands. This reform, together with measures to streamline regulatory processes, has enabled a surge of new projects with a pipeline of committed projects now representing over 10,000 megawatts of new capacity, being backed up by billions of rands of investment. Several municipalities are making use of the regulatory changes to procure power independently. We have introduced tax incentives for households and businesses to invest in rooftop solar. We have called on the financial institutions to support this effort through affordable funding for households and small and medium enterprises. And the government itself will assist poor households through a number of programs that were announced by the Minister of Finance. The debt transfer package for Eskom, together with the progress made in restructuring Eskom, will enable the necessary investment in the transmission network and in maintenance of Eskom's generation fleet. We expect the National Transmission Company to be fully operational shortly. Now, through our renewable energy program, we have signed agreements for approximately 2,800 megawatts for bid window 5 and 6, with large projects already in construction and others on track to reach financial close soon. Last night at a dinner, I met some colleagues who are already saying we've just had financial close and we are moving on with the projects on renewable energy. We recently released a request for proposals for over 500 megawatts of battery storage, and will soon open further bid windows for wind and solar, battery storage, and gas power. Now, as we work to close the electricity supply shortfall and end load shedding or blackouts in the short term, we are laying the foundation for a fundamental reform of the energy sector in the longer term. Cabinet has approved the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill, which will soon be tabled in Parliament to establish a competitive market for electricity generation. Though load shedding will remain a challenge in the immediate future, its severity will begin to ease as some of the more targeted initiatives recently announced begin to take effect. What we are witnessing in the energy sector is an undeniable surge of investment that will not only address the electricity supply shortfall in years to come, but will propel growth and create new jobs. Even as we speak, and even as we work to improve the performance of our existing coal-fired power stations to address load shedding, we remain committed to a just energy transition, and our target of achieving net zero emissions by 2050 remains. We will implement our Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, which outlines our investment needs to support a just and inclusive transition towards cleaner forms of energy. And we will, as we have said, be doing this at a pace that our economy can absorb and can afford. We will soon be completing the review of the Integrated Resource Plan to lay the foundation for a fundamentally transformed energy landscape that transitions us along a low-carbon, climate-resilient developmental path. But it has to be a path that does not leave our people behind. We will undertake this just transition, as I said, at our pace, as we can afford it and in a manner that advances our developmental objectives and ensures energy security. In the long run, investment in green energy will be a huge boost to economic growth. There are indeed opportunities in this crisis, including for the local manufacture of solar panels, batteries, and there are a number of South African companies that are already manufacturing batteries of a sizable nature, as well as inverters, and the use of our unique natural endowment in resources like platinum and vanadium. This will open up new opportunities for employment and the skilling and upskilling of workers, especially young people. We are equally focused on addressing the crisis in the logistics sector. Transnet's railway and port constraints are significantly affecting the mining, agriculture, forestry, automotive, and manufacturing sector. We are prioritizing port and rail efficiencies as part of the structural reform process that we have embarked upon. Our new national rail policy provides for third-party access to the freight rail network, which will allow private rail operators onto the network to increase investment and improve efficiency. To facilitate third-party access, Transnet is establishing a separate infrastructure manager for the rail network. In the interim, Transnet is implementing a range of measures to arrest the decline in performance of the freight rail system, including to increase the availability of locomotives for key corridors. And we're in the process of resolving a dispute that has been going on for quite a while. Transnet is also in the process of establishing private sector partnerships at Durban and Ngqura container terminals, which we expect to be concluded in the coming weeks. Significantly, we have agreed with key stakeholders to establish a National Logistics Crisis Committee to drive the implementation of a comprehensive roadmap for the freight logistics sector. In the usual South African tradition, I have met various sectors of the logistics industry, be they miners, be they auto workers, auto producers, and I've also taken time to meet the workers and hear their views, and the views that are coming through and the proposals and the suggestions are the type that are going to enable us to resolve the challenges that we have. Just as the private sector resource mobilization fund is providing support for the Energy Action Plan, we are greatly encouraged by indications from business that they are prepared to support government in our efforts to fix the logistics system, working with other role players. We are confident that working together with the private sector and organized labor, Transnet and government will be able to overcome these constraints to improve efficiencies. Immigration reform has long been cited by many businesses as an area of concern. A number of businesses want to bring their executives, and they've had quite a number of challenges. Today, we are able to announce a significant overhaul of the work visa system that will provide a further boost to investment. This includes decentralizing the adjudication of visa applications to foreign missions and streamlining application requirements to reduce the time frame for obtaining a work visa. We will introduce a trusted employer scheme for qualifying companies and establish a points-based system to provide more flexible pathways for skilled applicants in line with global best practice. We will introduce new visa categories for remote workers and startups to attract dynamic entrepreneurs and promote spending in our economy. In addition, we will be expanding the e-visa system to include an additional 20 countries over and above the 14 that are currently eligible, and will extend the e-visa system to cover new visa categories such as study, business, and intra-company transfer visas. Now, these reforms will enable us to attract skills and investment and create jobs while protecting and promoting the employment of South Africans. As we reform our visa regime, we're investing in the skills development system to ensure that we produce the skills that our economy needs. The National Skills Fund will soon launch a new model for demand-led skills development, which will provide 800 million rand to fund training for unemployed young people in digital skills. Minister Blade Nzimande is working on this and is going to make this happen. The key innovation of this model is that payment will be linked to placement of young people in employment as opposed to training alone to incentivize improved outcomes. The Pay for Performance Fund is designed to crowd in funding from multiple sources, and I would like to call on the support of the private sector in taking this model to scale. Crime and corruption continues to hamper South Africa's development. To address this grave challenge, specialized multidisciplinary task teams have been set up by the police to tackle crimes of economic sabotage, such as violence and extortion at construction sites, illegal mining, infrastructure vandalism, and cable theft. A number of arrests have already been made, followed by prosecutions and quite a number of convictions. This steady progress is important as we strive to break up organized crime syndicates. Our hard work to rebuild state institutions is bearing fruit. The South African Police Service, the Special Investigating Unit, and the National Prosecuting Authority Investigating Directorate is making notable progress in dealing with cases of serious corruption. This work has resulted in arrests, asset forfeitures, successful convictions, and the recovery of misappropriated funds. Supported by data provided by the South African Reserve Service and the Financial Intelligence Center, a multidisciplinary fusion center is helping the NPA to successfully prosecute corruption-related offenses and unravel complex financial crimes. Since its inception, the work of the Fusion Center has led to the preservation and recovery of almost 2 billion rand in criminal assets. These developments highlight the importance of South Africa's efforts to be removed from the Financial Action Task Force grey lists as soon as possible. Our country's inclusion on the list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring is intended to raise standards of compliance in our country. Both our banking sector and our anti-money laundering legislation already meet FATF requirements. We are working with FATF to effectively address all outstanding deficiencies and strengthen the effectiveness of our anti-money laundering as well as finance of terror financing. Yesterday, I met with business leaders from some of South Africa's leading companies to discuss the challenges that are holding up growth in our economy. We agreed to undertake practical joint action in 3 immediate priority areas: in energy, logistics, and crime and corruption. In doing so, we will be building on the collaborative model that we used so successfully in managing our response to COVID-19, but also in our vaccine rollout, where we collaborated excellently. We are confident that if we can address these three issues, we will be able to make a contribution, amongst other things, to turn our economy around and unleash its full potential. This fifth South Africa Investment Conference marks the end of the first phase of our investment mobilization drive. As South Africans, we have always believed in our country and its great promise. We know from our engagements with you as investors that you see this potential too, a potential that is evident in the investment that we continue to attract. And that is why so many of you are here. It is this great promise and potential of South Africa that you see, and for us as South Africans, it is this great promise that keeps us going and that keeps us working at the problems that we have. South Africa's first country investment strategy is being finalized. It will outline priority areas and sectors to advance our country's economic interest and will be driven at the highest level with oversight provided by the Presidency. Investment in our economy is not just about the amounts you have seen on this stage over the years. When we expand the lens and take in the aggregate picture, we see some encouraging trends as well. Following the devastating impact of COVID-19, total fixed investment in nominal terms increased from 756 billion in 2020, rand that is, to 811 billion in 2021, and to 933 billion in 2022. So there's upward movement. From historical data, we know that total investment in our economy over a 5-year period comes in at roughly about 4 trillion. Now, here at this conference, we have sought to mobilize, working together with you, a portion of that total investment. And this has been a collaborative effort on your part. Building on this baseline, we will work towards a new target. As I announced in the State of the Nation address in February, we're now setting a new target to mobilize approximately 2 trillion rand in new investments over another 5 years period between now and 2028. The investments emanating from the 4 investment conferences held to date have stimulated industrial, technological, and institutional modernization in our country. These investments have supported the expansion of human capital and knowledge transfer and created more jobs and learning opportunities. Talking about expanding human capital, I had occasion to talk to the head of Google last night, and the attraction they have seen to South Africa, and to come here and invest and expand our human capital has been based on the fact that they see South Africa as an investment destination. With the achievement of our 1.2 trillion target today, we now cast our collective eyes up onto the horizon. With your support, with your investment, we can realize more growth, offer more opportunities, and create even more jobs. As we work with dedication and focus to overcome our immediate challenges, let us not lose sight of the incredible promise of our country, South Africa. I look forward to our deliberations in your getaway groups today, and also to the new investment pledges that will be announced. And I've heard that there are quite a number of exciting investment pledges that are going to be announced today. So this conference is significant, it is meaningful, and it is a conference that is taking South Africa forward. And I'd like to thank you for your presence here, but more importantly, I'd like to thank those who are going to announce their commitments. I thank you in advance, knowing that you make your commitments seriously, having discussed them in your own companies, and you look at growing your own companies, and also for us creating more jobs so that we can address the issue of poverty and inequality in South Africa. So welcome to this conference and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, ladies and gentlemen, you got that loud and clear. Our report card is looking good. We've reached our 1.2 trillion rands target that we set 5 years ago. I think that deserves a round of applause. That was important. Tick that box. And now we focus on the next 5 years, and the president has been unequivocal in terms of setting that particular target, 2 trillion rands over the next 5 years. Mr. President, thank you also for taking us through the various policy enhancement initiatives that have been happening in our country. No country in the world is without its challenges. The important part is that we are putting foot to the pedal in terms of finding the solutions. And the rest of the conference today, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, is going to be about that. All right? So the issues are open and bare. The president has spoken about them. So we're not here to color a picture that, we're trying to oversell. We're selling the reality, but we're also selling the promise. In his concluding remarks, the president said that we must not forget the promise, the incredible promise of our country, South Africa. And I think that's the spirit with which we want to engage with today. Coming up next, I am honored to be able to welcome on stage for our very first panel, where we're going to be discussing this theme of investing in South Africa. And after that panel, we'll have another panel that will focus specifically on the electricity challenge that I'm pretty sure everybody in the room is aware of. And that will get into the deeper detail of perhaps one of the most important challenges that's making it a little bit difficult for us to get the growth that we want. And thereafter, we'll have tea, and that'll be followed also by the breakaways that I promised you. I'll tell you a bit more about where to go, what the logistics are, about all of that a little bit later on. Right now, though, let me call on stage my panel as they make their way. And we're going to be talking about what it means to invest for growth in our country. This panel is featuring some key decision makers in the world of business and also government. None other than Minister Mamuluku Kubai, who is the Minister of Human Settlements. But she's also, you may not know this, she's also the co-chairperson of the Economic Sectors Employment and Infrastructure Development Cluster. So she will be, she's well positioned to help us think through the challenges and opportunities of investing in our beautiful country. Minister Mamuluku, thank you so much for joining us. Also joining us is the thorn amongst the roses, Mr. Duncan Oneblood. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Anglo American, and they've been big investors, of course, in the country for many, many years. And he's going to be joining us also to share what the journey has been for Anglo in the past 5 years, and also some of the challenges that they've come to face and deal with. Thank you so much, Duncan, for joining us. And lastly, the Chief Executive of Rand Merchant Bank, Ms. Emery Brown. Please make your way as well, ma'am. Of course, these are the people that manage the capital here in our country. And we'll be very interested to see where the money is coming from. Thank you so much, ladies and gents.
Nice to meet you.
Emery, would you like to sit this side? I think that might be a little bit better. Thank you. Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gents, for joining us. We've got a couple of minutes for me to pick your brains on the opportunities. I think the challenges are well documented, and I think we know what they all are. But what we may not be aware of is how it affects you individually in your day-to-day work, and how in recent times you've been able to, answer the ask, especially for global companies like your own, Duncan, where people are asking, boards are asking, global boards are asking, what's happening in South Africa? What is this promise? How are you answering the question?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and of course, it's front and foremost in investors' minds. And this is not so much at the board level; it's about the people who invest in the company. And I have to say that the narrative in South Africa has deteriorated quite significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. And on a global stage, that plays out very negatively for investment in South Africa. And so, of course, I was asked a couple of days ago, and yesterday indeed, is South Africa investable? Because of the electricity situation, because of the logistics situation, because of the crime and corruption and all the lack of services and the inability to deploy healthcare and sanitation and sewage and water and so on and so on. What does that mean for business ultimately at the end? And I said, well, of course South Africa is investable, because I speak about it in exactly the same way as the president just spoke about it. So the raw and untapped potential that exists here. But of course, that story will start to wear thin unless we can demonstrate some tangible actions in closing the gap between the desire for a country that is growing in an inclusive and a transformative sort of way to the one that we actually experience today.
Right.
And so there are some real tangible action steps that need to be taken, measured in short time frames, a few quick wins that we need to achieve to be able to change and turn that negative investor sentiment and narrative around. And having said that, it was incredibly pleasing to hear what both the minister and the president said today. This focus, this laser-like focus on at least 3 of the major issues that are crippling the country today, and holding it back from achieving its potential, is now sort of front and foremost on the agenda item. And I think that this is not just the work of government. Government needs to be done. It needs to be done very effectively to get this done, but in collaboration and partnership with business, who I think stand absolutely ready to play their part in driving this turnaround.
Emery, as a financier for you, how does that play out when this conversation comes up? And as chief executive of R&B, you've got to, share the promise, like the president and the minister have just done, as well as what Duncan has done. How do you do that?
Yes, I think that it is really reassuring this morning to hear all the measures that the president spoke about that are being put in place. But I think for us, as a financial institution, the impact that we're just seeing on our clients is still significant. We do see, just as a consequence of load shedding, the reduction in our GDP growth for the year. It's a 1 percentage point reduction down to 0.4. That has got real consequences for companies that has to deliver to their investors. And then, as the president indicated, the 3 things that come to mind continuously is energy, the security, and logistics. But the other one that we are concerned about is water supply. And, all of those things don't only impact our companies, but it also impacts our people in South Africa.
Yep.
And, for us, what we see play out in our clients is it increases the cost of production. That obviously impacts our ability to compete internationally. And, I think for me, the way we see it is that for the future of South Africa, international investment is so important. And these challenges does make it difficult for us to position the potential of South Africa as an attractive investment destination, while there is this uncertainty as to when we will implement the reform. So it's wonderful to hear that, we're really talking between government and the private sector, but for us it is still a concern around the speed of implementation. And we do believe that if we can get these reforms in place, that we can really unlock unlock the potential that South Africa offers both local and international investors.
Speaking of the speed of reform, Minister Kupai, you have this other hat I referred to as I was asking you to come on stage. And I had a quick look at that ERRP document, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. And in it noted the consensus that there is between social partners around the structural changes that the economy needs to go through to unlock growth and allow for development. Now, we've got the report card from the Minister and the President about how we've done in the past 5 years in raising investment. Both CEOs have referred to these changes happening at the pace they need to happen. Duncan spoke about the response wearing thin unless there's action. Please share with us what this ERP has achieved to date and some of your reflections when you're asked a similar question. Is South Africa investable?
Thank you very much. I think the first issue for me is to acknowledge that part of what we had to deal with is COVID-19. And the ERRP, Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, was as a response by government to say what is it that we need to do to recover the economy so that we can be able to see growth, not towards, not growth to pre-COVID, but even just making sure that we surpass the numbers that we had. There are quite a number of issues that we had put in place in terms of structural reforms that we put as a target. And I always say, if people say most of the time that government does not implement, one of the signs of implementation is ERRP, because in what we had committed there, 80% of that had been achieved, which in terms of school, it will be an A plus that we need to do. We said we'll raise the license in terms of embedded generation, it was done. We said we'll change the condition in terms of water license, it was done. We said we'll release the critical skills list, it was done. We said we'll improve in terms of the visa waivers and change the environment. We have increased the number of countries in terms of visa waivers. We said we will ensure that the spectrum auction happens. It happened. We said we'll finalize the white paper on rail. It was done. So there are quite a number of issues when you look in terms of the commitments against the ERRP has been done. And there are few that already you can see progress, either already in terms of legislation or policy. They are already in cabinet. For example, we've passed some of the white papers that we needed to do. So from policy point of view and changes in terms of regulatory environment, we've been able to do. What was unfortunate, and that's why you could see last financial year, third quarter and second and fourth quarter, you could see the resilience of the economy in terms of economic growth, despite having high level of load shedding. It's because of some of these interventions that were done deliberately. But if we are, again, so I can talk about that in terms of achievements and work that has been done and monitoring. And I agree in terms of saying, when we put plans in place, what is important is the monitoring and evaluation. The reason why we saw success of ERRP is because there was constant monitoring both by the cluster itself in cabinet, but also by the president and cabinet. So we regularly reported, and that's why we could do even regular updates with Minister Mandasha in terms of how far we've been. Now, in terms of the story around investing in South Africa, one of the things that I say is that we tend, yes, as you said, we tend to focus on the negative, which we must pay attention to. But there are quite a number of things that make South Africa a good area of investment, which sometimes we don't talk about. We have a judicial system that is functioning. This is important for business because you know when you invest in South Africa and you are done hard by, you have where to go and find justice. In other countries and some, you don't find. You don't have an environment where you can wake up and get a tax or even something that you must pay that you don't know how it did. There's law and processes. So SARS doesn't wake up and say you owe tax without you understanding, which we see in other countries where companies are asked to pay money that sometimes they can't explain. In South Africa, we can safely say it will not happen because we have laws. So there's an environment that is conducive for business to happen. Yes, we do have challenges around what President raised, around the construction mafias, for example, and that is being paid attention to so that we have a holistic, secured environment, and that's what we talk about, securing the economy. Because it's critical for us to secure the economy so that businesses do not feel issues around threatened in terms of law enforcement and all that. So those are some of the areas that I would like to, so just to flag as critical as a conducive environment for business.
Minister, I want to first start by thanking you for reminding us of the achievements, because you're 100% correct. We very often focus on the challenge at hand. So, you know, when you kept going about all the things that were achieved and you mentioned one after the other, I almost want to replay you. I wish I was recording you, just as a reminder of the things that have been achieved. But, you know, outside of the legislative challenge and outside of the logistics priority that the President mentioned, that other third element around crime, criminality, and corruption is something that's quite palpable in the experience of South Africa. Just general security and crime. What are your thoughts about how we can actually turn the tide about that reputation of a country that appears lawless, even though that's not the truth?
Look, the first issue for me, and this is the work that has been done by the NPA and your Fusion Center, it's coordinated work. I think they've been able to do quite a lot in terms of getting cases into courts. What we need to see now is prosecution around corruption and investigations that happens. I always say, tell me a country, very few again, in the world, not only in on the continent, in the world, where you have the rule of law, where even either a sitting head of state can be asked to come and account in a court of law. Now, we talk about South Africa in terms of corruption. Yes, the most important thing is to protect the funds and public purse and make sure that corruption doesn't happen. But what we are guaranteed of in South Africa is that should it happen, there will be consequences. That's the first thing. Now, when we deal with the issue around crime and corruption, again, it has to be, I think I echo, it has to be partnership. Government alone can't do it. Because in corruption, there will be a corruptor and a corruptee.
Yep.
So if we take the efforts, all of us, and understand that this should not happen, I should not bribe. I must make sure that things happen properly. And where we blow the whistle, where whistleblowers blow the whistle and say this is wrong, that has happened, and therefore you have. And we've got quite a number of cases that are before the courts, similarly around ensuring that we correct. You'd see the report that the President released to Parliament that responded to what is it that government is doing in terms of responding to the report by Judge Sondo's commission on state capture, addressing the issues of governance so that we don't see the past recurring. So there's commitment around redressing the problems,
right,
and paying attention to them, strengthening of the security cluster. Part of the issue you have seen in terms of the budget and the President's SONA, more particularly attention was paid to security cluster and making sure that we have more money into that. So if we work together with private sector, for example, enabling and bringing, for example, some of the issues around technology and policing, it will assist. Drones, webcam will assist in terms of improving the rate of, improving prevention of corruption and criminality. I think as we go, those are some of the areas for me where I'm sitting. And also from government point of view, we think that are enabling for a partnership. Last point on that one, we look at what has happened within the mining sector. If you go there and start looking at how they started to deal with the issue of illegal mining, it was a joint effort between private sector and government to be able to deal with that area. And you could see the results as they were dealing with the illegal mining system arrest and specialized team. The President, when he addressed here, he spoke about the specialized team that are looking in ensuring that we secure the economy.
On that note, let me come to you, Duncan. As CEO of Anglo American, you've been part of a lot of, let's call it taking advantage of some of the achievements by government in terms of the policy environment and making sure they work for your business. Just take us through the Anglo journey so far and also in solving some of the problems you've got in the mining industry in particular.
Indeed, and you know, very difficult to disagree with anything that the minister said, and the elements of what's great about South Africa and policy within South Africa is absolutely crystal clear. and I think observable from many quarters, and highly valued, absolutely highly valued. The frustration generally is the pace at which change happens to affect some of these policies. But of course, the key milestones and attributes that we've been able to achieve over many years is actually because of collaborative work with partners in government, partners in civil society, and other business partners, because we tend to be stronger when we are doing things together on the back of a common cause. And this also involves our own investments in not only the bricks and mortar and the machines and the equipment and the holes in the ground and so on, but in the development of local communities, in the development of municipalities, and the ability to try and ensure that there is a life and a livelihood well beyond mining, in the way that we think about deploying funds and time and resources into the host nations and the countries that we work with. And that cannot be done on the basis that it was a charity. That will never work. It can only be done on the basis of really combined effort in thinking about where we want to go to together and what each of us are going to do, government and business. And so some of the things that we've done in the Limpopo province with our collaborative regional development program, our impact catalyst program, these are the sorts of things that manifest, leaning on the back of very, very excellent government policy and a will to come to an outcome that's better than the one that we have today.
Emery, let me come to you on the same question. I mean, being in financial services, you can't really operate just in a country, right? There's global dynamics, and we all know of all the challenges that happen in the rest of the world. How are your clients seeing the investment opportunity that is South Africa, and you as a South African kind of a based bank, relative to the rest of the world? Because, we might be talking about our own challenges, but we're not the only ones with problems.
No, I mean, Andile, it's very true, and I think the Minister also alluded to it, and I think our clients are very much aware of it, and some of them have seen, where they try and go into other countries, that it's not that easy to do business in the rest of the world. I think for, what a lot of companies like ourselves are deeply invested in South Africa, and for us, this is first and foremost the country that we need to get to work, and to work for the private sector and for the government and for our people, because this is really where our success lies. And and I think I just want to pick up on a point Duncan made as well. This collaboration between government and the private sector is so important to build on the policy reforms that the Minister has said that are in place. And I think that the power of that is the private sector brings the skills and the capital, and if we combine it with the willingness from the government, that we can really re-establish South Africa to its former glory. And for me, that is really where as a country we should focus on first and foremost. How do we achieve that? But then to your point on what are we seeing about external investments, I think again a reform that the government has implemented around opening up foreign investment, but the reality is that we can see the capital outflow that is happening, which to my mind is concerning, because we actually want that capital to be invested into South Africa. So I think that is definitely a sign of our investor community looking at beyond South Africa's borders to deliver the required returns to their investors. I think if you go to broader corporates, there's definitely continuous looking at the rest of the world, but I think overall the sentiment is still that there's so much potential in South Africa that we really need to see how we unlock that. Just to add on top of that, as you say, as South Africa, we're an open economy, we're very susceptible to what happens in the rest of the world. And you know, for me also, another important aspect that we need to consider is just our reliance on exports.
Yeah.
And you know, that you have companies like Anglo and others that, you know, they are significant contributors to the success of the rest of the world. And I think for me it's just important that we are always cognizant about the importance of our trade partners and that flow of value into our country, and how important that is for us, you know, to ensure that we reinvest in our economy and in our businesses so that we can lift our unemployment, that we can deal with poverty. So it's always important for me. I think there's a lot of focus of what we need to do in South Africa, but I think it's also important that we just maintain those important trade partnerships, you know, with very important trade partners.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Minister, you know, the two of the three challenges mentioned by the President where he had the meeting with business, I think he was referring to a meeting last night, are electricity and logistics. And those challenges are very much linked to state-owned entities. Frustration of business has generally been, we want to help, we're ready to help, but it's hard for us to get things done or done as quickly as we would like. We're seeing a lot of policy relaxation, third-party access on the Transnet network, what's happened also in terms of the licensing on the electricity side. Is that an opportunity for us to potentially partner much quicker? Because one could argue that we need not have gotten to both those challenges to being so serious before we start working together. And maybe the lesson we should take is, how do we accelerate the pace? Your thoughts?
No, thanks. Can I just touch base on
Sure.
one issue that she raised around the capital outflows? One of the areas that we're starting to pay attention is to say, what is it that is causing that from government point of view? And another area that we're picking up, major issue that we're picking up, it's around even the issues where other countries are offering better condition in terms of tax, either the tax holidays for about 6 months and all those things, which sometimes makes it difficult for South Africa to do in the current economic environment. I think that I thought I should flag that we are paying attention to it. We started to look at what is alternative compared to other countries that they are offering, and what would we do to be able to bring back. The second area is around the ease of doing business, specifically that relates to around municipalities, where sometimes when you find companies are getting difficulty to get approvals in some of the issues. Minister Nkadimeng, we have been talking about that especially around the metros, that we'll have to pay attention to get the metros to function effectively so that business does not experience some of the frustration. So I thought, let me just not leave it like that way, that we're seeing the outflows. It's not that we are not concerned about them. We're paying attention to it and looking at what are the causal factors of that so that we can be able to address. Coming to the issue of state-owned entities, one of the issues that we acknowledge, or that all of us as South Africans have to acknowledge, that yes, and somebody could say it was self-pain that we inflicted upon ourselves in terms of the state capture. It really took away the capacity in the institutions. And to rebuild capacity in the institution doesn't take overnight. So losing capacity and rebuilding is not the same. You can lose instantly, people leave, but to attract them back, it's not the same. So what we're seeing most of the time is that this institution, whether I talk about Eskom, you talk about Transnet, we've lost critical skills that were able to help us to drive the economy in investment. But secondly, their balance sheet were weakened. Now, Transnet would easily drive economic development and drive quite a lot of projects around it. But when its balance sheet is weakened, it's not able even to go to the market to borrow. So you look at the rail network that they've got, one of the concessions that they've issued, public-private partnership, I hope. Most of the thing, we've got feedback to say there are quite a number of issues that needs to be addressed. And I know Minister Kodane and Minister Chikunga have been dealing with that together with Transnet executive. But there's more opportunities around what we can do in the network industries to be able to improve capacity there. We are paying attention to that one. So the issue around understanding the role of state-owned entities in terms of a developmental agenda, but also the ability to assist us to be able to bring the partnership. It's easier for a state-owned entity to do a PPP compared to a department, and that's why when you drive growth, you'll utilize the state-owned entities as part of that. And over time, whether it's around skills development, ESCOM used to be one of the best training places for engineers. Today, we've lost that capacity, and that's why we do not have the skills that we require, because it was an institution of government that could do that. Now, rebuilding of ESCOM started with the boards, putting together a competent board that all of us today, I doubt no one can say it's not a competent board. We see that. They are on the recruitment process of getting a CEO, and also part of the work that is being done together with the ministers responsible is to be able to get ESCOM to implement what we've called as the reforms there. And out of that, then it allows even for partnerships. That we could be able to utilize both state and private sector to be able to play. It has to be a partnership. That's why I'm emphasizing the partnership, because we acknowledge that government alone can't do it. Whether you talk about in the areas of Transnet, but also balancing, because sometimes the narrative in the public then, we are put in the corner as politicians to say you are selling off. So the explanation on how you do PPP and the model how it will benefit South Africans, it's quite important even in terms of narrative and how we put it and package it properly to be able to benefit.
I think it's very clear and it's very comforting to see and observe, not only just on this panel, but generally, I think in the past few years, I guess sometimes that's what challenges do, right? They highlight how much we need each other, and may it long continue. We got to wrap up now, ladies and gents. Duncan, let me start with you. I'd like each of you to share with me if there's one huge kind of a compelling opportunity for collaboration that certainly in your world you'd like to see happen, whether it's from government or from your colleagues in the business sector. What would you say that is?
Gosh, one thing. It's going to be a very long sentence. Look, I'd like to just say that the first thing about dealing with a challenge is recognizing you have one. And I think it's really pleasing to be in a position where actually we are all saying we recognize that this is a big challenge in terms of the investability of the country. It's lots to play for here, and we really need to get after it. The one thing that I think I would say is much more effective collaboration between government and business in writing and steadying the issues associated with logistics and the issues associated with electricity, at least. Of course, crime and corruption are a massive issue that are probably less easy to solve from an engineering point of view, but absolutely need to be solved and can only be done, in my view, by effective and genuine partnerships between business and government.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Emery, your thoughts, either from your colleagues in banking, other financiers, government, what would you say is an opportunity where we can get going on something that for you is quite important as CEO of RMB?
Yeah, so I think that it is just reassuring to hear, the minister also, and the thinking around this public and private partnership. For me, I think that is the single biggest theme, is if there's a willingness from government to work with the private sector, the willingness is definitely there in speaking to all of our clients. Everyone is just eager to contribute and work together to solve our challenges, because to the point you've made, there are challenges, but there's massive opportunity. And I think if we can just really get momentum behind that and ensure that we really start working together to create a clear plan and to get a clear message into both South Africa and into the rest of the world, that we are going to work together to implement the reforms and to set our country on the growth potential that it has. I think for me, that is really, then you can deal with everything else. You can deal with the electricity, you can deal with water, you can deal with the security, corruption, and logistics. And I think if we just can get together as a collective, I think that's where the power lies.
I think in the world of government, they call that a social compact,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Minister, the investors are here. They've done their part for the past 5 years. They're here because they want to be part of the next 5 years. 2 trillion rands is the number the president has given us. What would you say are the low-hanging fruit?
One is that South Africa is a gateway in terms of implementation of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. You're not only as an investor having an opportunity in South Africa, but you could utilize South Africa as a stop and also access the continent. Secondly is that we've got as South Africa a pipeline of various projects in terms of SIP. We've published them, but there are various sectors in the energy, in logistics, right, that you could be able to invest and partner. As I said, we guarantee a safe environment as a country, but more engagement to open up. I won't leave my sector, property development, quite important, because we've got to be able to ensure that we develop that, and there's quite huge opportunities in that area as well. To South African business community, what I would like to say is that for us to have a stable democracy, we've got to ensure that we've got an inclusive economy. Everybody must be part of it, and therefore we've got to work together to build that inclusive economy.
Absolutely, inclusive economy indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the Minister of Human Settlements, Minister Mameluku Kubai, Chief Executive of Anglo-American, Duncan Wanblad, and also the CEO of R&B, Emery Brown. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thanks, Emery. Cheers. Right, that gets us going on our first panel discussion. That was encouraging and robust. Yes, another round of applause, yeah. Lots of lessons to learn, right, from the past, call it 2 decades or so. Maybe please take those forward. We're going to keep it moving because we've got another panel coming up on stage. We've already heard this morning, and we all know too well, how a stable and reliable energy supply is essential for growth. Also, to tell us more about what is being done to address this, you would have seen some developments that we have a whole new minister in the presidency that is a focus on this particular job. He's part of this panel as well. And let me ask them to make their way to the stage. Of course, I'm referring to Minister Ramaphosa. He's also being joined on stage on this panel by Mr. Mpho Mokwana, who's the chairman of ESCOM, and also the chief executive of Vodacom, Mr. Shamil Jusub, as well as the president of the Minerals Council of South Africa, an organization that's responsible for our resources industry, Ms. Nolita Fawude. Over to you.
Shamil. You went. All right, pronounce it.
Hi. Morning, everyone. Mics are all working. So, we have an illustrious panel here. They were already introduced. Save me time. The president and the last panel also, I think, outlined quite well a lot of the policy issues. So that's taken, given that we've been cut back on time, we've got 30 minutes, that's given us a chance probably to spend a lot more time talking about investment. So I'm thinking that we have an opportunity to talk a lot more about investment projects, a lot more about investment opportunities. I wonder, Minister, if I can start with you in the hot seat. The president already outlined, sorry, if I could just say, what I'd like to do in this session is talk about energy availability to some extent, but again, also talk about investment opportunities. So let's have that top of mind. Minister, the president already outlined the Energy Action Plan. He spoke about the NECOM work, the National Energy Crisis Committee, and laid out all the issues. The last panel did as well. And then we also heard that the ERA amendments have just been approved. That's going to be a huge game changer. Could you talk about what's top of mind for you in your work?
Well, I think the president has laid solid foundation. So he makes the point that we already have adopted the Energy Action Plan, which has got 5 pillars as its outcomes. The first one is to fix ESCOM and ensure that we increase the energy availability factor. So essentially making sure that we stick to philosophy maintenance, we address the issues of outage slips, and by that I mean when we make a promise to take out the unit to say we're going to return it by this date, we need to keep to that date. And as you can see now, we have accelerated, or load shedding has lifted to stage 6, and a large part of that has to do with our inability to return the units to service. And therein lies about close to 2,000 megawatts. And then the second feature of that Energy Action Plan is around accelerated investment by private sector in in new generation. So we know that Minister Mantashe has lifted, if you like, the ceiling of embedded generation, and that's why we're encouraging private sector players to come into the space. And the President does make the point that we've got a pipeline of about 10 gigawatts already from various players in the space. And then the third feature of that energy action plan is accelerated procurement in renewables, battery storage, and solar power. The President does make the point that our commitment to the nationally determined contributions, the net zero path, essentially the decarbonization agenda is not in question. So we are unwavering about that commitment. So it's important that for us to be able to encourage that the accelerated procurement, as Minister Mantashe releases the next bid windows, we are able to provide sufficient capacity from a grid point of view, because we know that the grid is the biggest constraint. So it's important that we're able to make significant investments in the grid to be able to evacuate the electrons. And the fourth area is around rooftop solar. So as Minister Godongwane announced when he tabled the budget, there's significant amount of incentives that are being built to ensure that we encourage households to invest in rooftop solar and also small to medium enterprises. So what we're doing is to attempt to design a facility that will make it possible even for poor households to be able to make upfront capital investment on rooftop solar, so that the opportunities around these incentives are equitable. And then the last one is on the, if you like, the creation of various units of, if you like, distribution, transmission, and also generation. So we're able to create those companies, and Chairman Makwana can elaborate more on that. We have already moved in that respect. So the point I'm making is that we are not introducing a new plan. There's an existence of a plan. So the point is to find the 6,000 megawatts that are undermining our ability to eradicate the load shedding. And we are doing a considerable amount of work there. And I'm sure that as the panel conversation expands, we'll be able to articulate more what are some of these interventions that we are making to ensure that there's immediate relief, so that we give confidence to the market that we are serious about the resolution of this question. But this crisis also presents opportunities. So I did make the point around embedded generation, investment in grid capacity, rooftop solar. So we're introducing, if you like, facilities, incentives, working with private sector to make it possible for us to address the load shedding question.
And so I just wanted to alert the audience as well that there's quite actually detailed reporting on progress with the Energy Action Plan. I think the last report was January. Is there going to be one coming out now?
Oh yes,
report?
I mean, we're working on revising some of those commitments in the Energy Action Plan. I think it's important that we remain both aggressive and ambitious with our targets, but also within the parameters of what is realistic. And we did say, I mean, in the conversation with Minister Godan, that we are going to be brutally honest, frank, and transparent to the South African population and also to the investor communities on where we are in relation to the resolution of the load shedding question. And we're beginning to have those conversations with industry and also communicating on a regular basis with the South African community on where we are, so that there's a greater level of appreciation that we are indeed making progress. There's justified levels of anger, despondency, and just not believing on what government is saying. But I think the more we're transparent and we're able to illustrate that we're keeping to the timeline, I think we'll be able to close that gap with regards to the trust deficit and essentially get the economy going.
Okay, so we're going to be expecting a detailed report follow-up from January soon?
Yes,
That'll tell us where we are towards 2024. I think that's what everyone's waiting for. Sure. And Mpho Makwana, yet again, you've thrown yourself back into another hot seat, a fire. We're all watching Eskom. We know that I think we saw about an 8 gig gap last year. I guess what people are going to be wondering is, how's the step change coming at Eskom? what do you see as being the key drivers of getting a step change and the near term eating into that load shedding, that 8 gigs, 4 to 8 gigs that we're struggling with, and then the longer range? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think the issue for us as a board, if one starts from an outside-in perspective, we have a duty to ensure that we project some semblance of stability from a perspective of those that have put funds, be it from an investor bondholder point of view, to ensure that we lead the organization in a manner that strengthens the balance sheet, the income statement. So liquidity is top of mind for us, firstly, as a board. Secondly, I guess from a key customer point of view, given that we're here to talk about investment and creating investor confidence, the various industrial players and the various players that will be pledging investments here would fall within the category of our key customers. And our duty to them is to ensure that, as we started in January with a generations recovery plan, that we ensure that we stay the course of ensuring that the energy availability factor shows some semblance of predictability and stability, as the Minister of Electricity already indicated on some of the focus areas. So we have a turnaround plan that seeks to ensure that between now and March 2025, we restore healthy energy availability. Equally, on an outside-in perspective, the President mentioned the changes to the electricity bill. Our duty is to ensure that we fast-track the creation of the transmission company so that you've got a fully fledged board of directors, fully fledged executive core that will ensure that when that becomes an act of parliament, we're ready to implement creating that competitive platform for supply and demand of electricity. From an inside perspective, we have a duty to ensure that we fix the culture of Eskom, that all manner of dysfunctionality that we found caused by, among others, state capture, corruption, and the loss of talent that the Minister Kubai referred to earlier on, we are hard at work ensuring that we restore some semblance of a high-performance culture in the organization. So the human capital environment is quite critical to us. Secondly, the control environment is quite critical to us to clean up any remnants of past practices of corruption so that Eskom continues year on year to produce clean audit reports. That's very important, again, to show confidence to both our shareholder ministry in terms of the shareholder compact that we have entered into with the Department of Public Enterprises, but also, again, the outside-in bondholders and financiers need to see that well-governed entity.
Thanks. Nolita for Kude. Now we come to the private sector view. So I think we know how this has affected the mining industry, but obviously we'd like to hear from you. But also, from a positive perspective, the mining industry has stepped up with enormous embedded generation opportunities. And it would be great to hear from you how you think that's going, and we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. From a mining perspective, our opportunity has come from the fact that part of our decarbonization strategy requires us to reduce energy consumption that is coming from coal generation or even diesel. And therefore, with the renewable energy projects that have been enabled by the reforms, we have been able to see a lot of projects come through from the mining sector. Currently, we are sitting around close to 100 different projects that are coming from the mining sector, which are approximately, I think, Minister, out of your 10 gigawatts, about 7 or 8 of those come from the mining industry. And that's about 160 billion rands worth of projects in the pipeline for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, with that opportunity, it means then that we can start to think much more strategically around how we set up manufacturing, how we set up inclusive participation from an economic perspective for the communities, for employees, and also for SMEs. And lastly, just in terms of the renewable energy program, we do know that part of the energy mix for South Africa that we're looking at still for some time will include coal, which is currently a big input into our energy mix. But again, with government and other partners, we need to understand what are the other opportunities over and above renewable energy. Is it gas? Is it nuclear, and other opportunities that then from an investment perspective, we could all be looking into?
Having said that, it's been quite interesting to see what's been happening even in the coal industry with renewables energy investments like Suriti and other companies that have been investing heavily in renewables as embedded generation projects. I found that very fascinating to watch. Can we just summarize? Are we talking about around 8 or 9 gigs? And if so, what's the value of that? It's hard to hear each other on the. I hope the audience can hear us. Yeah. I'm struggling to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we talking about 8 or 9 gigs of power? This is what we've been reading, that 8 or 9 gigawatts is in play. What's the value of that? What are some of the time frames? And who invests? Who pays for it? Who builds it?
So the 8 to 9 gigawatts of renewable energy that will come through in the next 7 to 10 years from the mining industry comes from different companies. So, for example, within the mining sector, you have seen Suriti invest in a company called WindLab. You have seen Exxaro also look into that space. You have seen Anglo-American with EDFR talk about 3 to 5 gigawatts of renewable energy that will come through within this period, and many others who already have got their own embedded energy generation as well as additional that will help complement and supplement what is required by the country. And those projects collectively, as I was indicating, could give us up to 9 gigawatts of renewable energy worth 160 billion rands of investments. Now, the benefits out of that are quite huge, and that's what I was referring to earlier on.
Okay. So that's interesting because it's not completely equivalent, but it's a good portion of the coal plant that is then going to be put to bed in the next decade. So that's a very interesting movement. Shamil Yusuf. So you just have to live in the country to know what the impact of load shedding is on connectivity. So I'm not sure that I have to ask, but I could ask, and what the implications are for your company, but also that you've got such an interesting pilot going on with Eskom, and I think it could be a very interesting case for distributed companies. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure. So I think, firstly, it's been hugely disruptive to the industry. Industry has over 20,000 towers, and so, when load shedding comes, it of course affects, and so we're having to put a lot of batteries out, but a lot of generators as well to try and keep the networks up. Honestly speaking, customers don't appreciate that networks run on power. They somehow have the concept that it runs on air, but so, I think, so you'll often hear customers complaining, but there's no network. But if there's no power, there can't be a network. So I think, as the industry, we've invested Vodacom about 4 billion. I think industry close to 10 billion on power solutions over the last 3 to 4 years. So there's quite a bit of money that's gone into it. But in solution mode and trying to find solutions and working with Eskom to find solutions, this concept of virtual wheeling has been created, and the concept is that, and the idea is that we would do it, and then the rest of the industry would follow suit, and that the same model can then be used by everybody in the room to basically create a similar kind of solution, but which will all be to help contribute power to the grid and alleviate the power shortage. So the concept is we would then use and go and sign up with the IPPs. So it would be a 16 billion rand commitment for our power consumption. So we'd make that commitment for, and then contribute, sign up with the IPPs, contribute that power to the grid, and ESCOM would in turn pass us credits. The consumption will match the consumption that we consuming. But what's important is that it will be done at the ESCOM level and not necessarily at the municipality level. And ESCOM will then deal with the municipalities. So if we can achieve that, that will help to, from an industry perspective, it won't sort out our load shedding problems or on a side-by-side level, but would certainly help to contribute to the grid. So, I think it's a very exciting project, and if we can finalize it and move quickly on it, I think it becomes a model that then can be quickly replicated across. And then, so the pressure is not just on government, you're then using private sector's balance sheets to also, help solve the crisis. And I think that could be a very good solution. And then, of course, in further investment, there's a lot of on-site generation that we're busy piloting. Firstly, we just changed our entire campus in Midrand to basically all the rooftops, carports, everything has just become complete solar now. And that also is a big opportunity. One of the issues there is also our ability to contribute back to the grid. So in Gauteng, specifically Joburg City, you can't at this stage contribute back to the grid. So as soon as that is fast-tracked as well, then that also helps us to contribute that excess power, because we'll be generating more than what we need during different times of the day. And the idea is that we'll do all our data centers and our hub sites on a similar kind of approach. So that's one big investment. And then the other one is basically on-site, which is wind, solar, green energy, and so on.
So the ESCOM pilot, that hasn't actually started. Are you still signing that off?
We're signing it off hopefully in the coming days, and then the pilot can get off. But it should be, to be honest, the concept is relatively simple. So I think the pilot will very quickly confirm that it's doable.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking had been that it's quite an interesting pilot because, if you're a mine, it's one big place. But what do you do when you're a highly distributed network or a highly distributed company, maybe retail even, or a network company? So I think it's something that could be very interesting to be watching. So I think we're already talking about investments then. Minister, where do you see the biggest opportunities arising now?
Well, I think as Sis Nolita has indicated, I think there's a lot of initiative on the part of private sector to exploit the dispensation of embedded generation. So there's a significant amount of pipeline there. So what we need to be doing is to strengthen the grid because there's investment that must be made to strengthen the grid in the light of those investments, so that we don't undermine the commercial proposition and business case of these entities when they want to initiate projects around the embedded generation. The second one is related to the conversation about the possibility of feed-in tariffs for both households and small to medium businesses outside your big enterprises, in that once you design that dispensation of feed-in tariff, it's possible to expand the flow of revenue streams for households and also make sure that the excess energy that they're generated gets to be fed into the grid. We know the experience of Vietnam, that over a period of 12 months, they've been able to generate an additional capacity of about 9,000 megawatts. And essentially, they're sitting with a different problem now. Because of the success of that program, there's extra capacity and the grid can accommodate it. And therefore, they have to do some corrections so that they remain within the acceptable frequencies and not undermine or facilitate the collapse of the grid. And then the other one, as mentioned, is the next bid windows that Minister Mantashe will be unleashing as the custodian of the integrated resource plan it does envisage a multiplicity of technologies in that. So there's wind, there's solar, there's battery storage. Those are the ones that are going to be a priority in the next bid windows. So we know that we are on an accelerated path, as the President has indicated. The share of renewable as a total mix of the energy mix in the country is going to grow exponentially. Of course, your base load still remains coal and nuclear, but going into the future, I think that's an area of interest. And then the last one, of course, I did make the point earlier on, is the strengthening of the grid. One of the major commercial banks in the country has computed that they will require investments of upwards of 100 billion rands for us to make it possible to ensure that we're able to evacuate the electrons and we're able to get to the energy mix that confirms our commitment to the nationally determined contribution. So I see that there's opportunities in that space to help us to address that question. And of course, the coal fleet is the most immediate opportunity to help us to resolve the load shedding question. And I'm sure there's a multiplicity of technologies that exist there that can help us to ensure that we continue to extract a lot of value. We sweat these assets and we're able to bridge that delta of 6,000 megawatts to ensure that we're able to eliminate load shedding and make it possible for the country to grow and achieve the targets as codified in the National Development Plan.
Thanks. Umpo? One of the questions I might ask, and you can divert if you like, is when we will expect to see a transmission company being set up, what would its frame be, and what do you think the impact on the market might be, and investment? And you can add to that as you like.
In terms of our plans, we envisage that in the third quarter of this year, calendar year 23, all things constant, we should be ready to, from our side, have the transmission company fully running. The biggest investment opportunity that we believe lies before us in terms of insulating the poor members of our society, who are the majority of our society, from challenges of load shedding, lies in a microgrid system that we've been piloting in the Free State. For 2 million rands, which is what it costs to put up a container, solarized container, you can insulate up to 50 homes from the challenges of load shedding. This is important in our view because these are ordinary members of South Africa that can't afford to invest in an inverter, to invest in rooftop solar. And so we would be inviting any investors that from their CSI budgets and from their enterprise development budgets that could partner with us. It's a locally made container at Eskom. And so for 2 million rands to enable a village or a township of 50 homes to sustain themselves in these difficult challenges of load shedding. That's the second part that we believe we can make our fair share contribution in that score. But as far as the transmission company is concerned, as soon as it's up and running, it should begin to facilitate, as the minister has indicated, the participation of more players in the energy supply and generation.
Okay, Nolita, I have a bunch of questions. We had a very wide-ranging discussion before the panel. And I guess one of the most contentious areas in the country and in the world is about the future of coal. So let me start there, because I have a couple of questions for you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, as I was saying to the audience, I hope that you can hear, but it's a struggle to hear on the stage, unfortunately. So one of the most contentious issues that we spoke about is that, you know, the reality is that 70 or 80% of the system currently is coal. And there will be a phase down, but coal is in our future. Forever, but even if it scales down. So we had a discussion about the future of coal and your concern that because banks are trying not to finance coal now, that companies are becoming less visible. It becomes harder to manage some of the social consequences and environmental consequences of that. I thought maybe you could just speak. Also, I wanted to say, even to the audience, a very interesting report by Meridian Economics on phase-down finance, as opposed to green, in addition to green finance, but also financing the reality that there is coal. So managing that with requirements. I think we have to have an honest discussion nationally about this. Could you say something about that?
Actually, I'm pleased that we get to talk about this also within this context, because coal is part of the energy source of South Africa and other countries globally. And it is also important that we all understand and agree that part of our commitments to climate change and net zero targets that even South Africa is committed to for 2050 means then that there are certain responsibilities that each and every one of us as stakeholders need to deliver to. And one of those is to make sure that the just energy transition is not just around switching from one source of energy to the other, but also it's how it is done. It's the funding, it's access to the funding for that transition. It's also how communities who are impacted upon by the economic activity that is currently happening in their spaces. For example, in South Africa, we know Mpumalanga as a province is a coal-intensive economic area. And therefore, what is the future of Mpumalanga from an economic diversification perspective? And we need to have those conversations and understand how it will be transitioned to a new economic environment where you still include other sources of energy, but also other economic activities. But lastly, on the issue of how we dial down the coal consumption in country, it's very clear that where we currently are at 80% of our energy generation coming from coal, is that between the next 10 to 15 years, we are most likely still to be using coal as a base load. What percentages, those will be determined by how fast we accelerate and move into renewable sources of energy, including other forms of energy. And that energy mix that the country is committing to will also help for us to be able to work through how we get to meet those targets and commitments.
And then your industry must be very excited, based on the kinds of opportunities that the minister was discussing around mining around new sources of energy, platinum, rare earth minerals. So many opportunities.
Definitely, mining is part of the transition from a climate change perspective. The minerals of the future are important, whether it's copper, whether it's cobalt, and also more importantly, it's important to acknowledge that 70% of the minerals that are required for climate change transition, those are sitting in Africa. So from a continent perspective, we need to think through how do we leverage that from an economic development and beneficiation perspective for the continent, and mining is part of that role for the future.
So difficult times, but exciting times. We're out of time, but Shamil, would you like to say some final words?
No, I think the big part is the investment opportunity around the energy part is there. And I think if we work together as industry, as private sector with the government, we can help to contribute to solving the issue quicker.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much to everyone for joining the panel, and let's give our panel some applause.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panel. Thank you to, of course, our moderator, Miriam Altman. I think there's a lot more that is clearer on stage as they are hugging and loving each other in a true South African style. When the chairman of ESCOM is hugging the CEO of Vodacom, you must know we're on a good track. Ladies and gentlemen, we've gotten to the point where we're going to be talking about the investment pledges for the current year. We're not going to just give you a set of numbers. We're going to have a bit of a ceremony here on stage. And for me to assist me in doing so, I'm going to be calling on my co-pilot, Tami Nkadibeng, who's the co-host of this wonderful conference. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for her.
A very good morning to everybody. I hear
How are you?
I'm good. You've been holding
You
it
look
down
good.
quite-
You like standing on the left or on the right? How do we do this?
It doesn't really matter. Maybe I'm shorter. Maybe I'll come on the
Okay,
front.
all
There
right.
we go.
Are you shorter? I never noticed, actually. Ladies and gents, the process is going to be quite simple. Tavi will take us through how we're going to do this. There are a lot of companies. In fact, I think it's a record this year
Yeah.
in terms of the number of companies that have pledged. But first up, I do need to call His Excellency. I'm looking for him. There he is. President, please join us on stage, sir. A round of applause for the President. We can shake hands now, right? How are you, President? How well are
Good
you?
morning. I'm good and you?
Mr. President, I'm going to need you on this side, I think.
Yes.
I think
So,
I asked the
while-
protocol team earlier if I can stand on the podium. They said I can stand here, but I can't stand there. All right, great. Tami?
Great. So while they're positioning and getting ready, there's a reason why we are positioning His Excellency. What we're going to ask is every company that has made its pledge will then come up on stage, but there are just 3 rules you need to abide to. Only 1 representative per company can come to stage. Only 1. So if you have picked 2, please decide in the next 20 seconds which one of the 2 is actually going to come up on stage. You will then make your way up the stage, go towards His Excellency, our President, shake his hand, and then exit at the back. Our team is standing by. Please do not go back to your seat via the front stairs. So you come up the front stairs, shake His Excellency's hand. There will be a photo opportunity for you, and then you make your way outside towards the back.
Right, so let us get going, and without any further delay, let's bring up some of our investors. We're starting with mining and mineral beneficiation. Notwithstanding the challenges, of course, that have been met by the industry in the past few years, 5 companies are investing in new mineral exploration, mining expansion, and related activities. For the 5th year in a row, Ivanhoe Mines is announcing the next phase in the development of their Plat Reef mine in Limpopo. This year, they are announcing a further 6 billion rand investment.
The Minar Group from Turkey is investing 1 billion rand in thermal coal mining activities in Mpumalanga. Nkwe Platinum is investing 13 billion rand in a new platinum mine in Limpopo province.
And the representative of this company needs no introduction. Oh, that's funny. Limpopo meet Limpopo. All right, moving on. Gold One is investing 520 million rand in gold mining in Gauteng. Thank you, Gold One. PMG Mining is investing 1.25 billion rands in manganese mining in the Northern Cape. Thank you, PMG. An Anglo-American CEO has just been on stage with us and is investing, wait for it, 29 billion rands. across their mining operations in South Africa.
Fantastic. Do you want to do that? So that brings us to the end of that sector. We now have the energy sector. In the energy sector, we have 11 investment pledges being announced here today, representing not only much needed new generation capacity, but also investment in the manufacturing of components for this key industry.
Right, so Art Solar, which is a black industrialist, gives me great pleasure, is investing 108 million rands in the production of solar PV panels at their factory in Durban. Following them, Energy Africa is investing 135 million rand in the production of small solar PV panels and solar cooking appliances at their women-led
Come on now.
production facility in Cape Town.
The Solar Group is investing 3.8 billion in solar projects for Tronox mineral sands as part of the mining sector's drive to become more resilient in the face of energy supply challenges. Mashaku is investing 580 million rands in 3 solar PV projects for Harmony Gold. There we go.
Here we go, Mashago.
Chariot and Total Eren from France is investing 800 million rands in solar PV projects for the Tarisa mine in Northwest Province.
Following them is Unigreen from the Russian Federation. They're investing 1.35 billion rands in solar PV projects in the Northern Cape to supply private off-takers elsewhere in South Africa.
She wasn't briefed.
And the Sariti Green. Now, you know Sariti Green is the newly established green energy company from the Sariti Group. They are investing a whopping 4.5 billion rands in the largest wind project in South Africa that's going to be producing 155 megawatts of energy.
As they make their way to stage, now if some of you know me, you know that I studied to be an accountant, but I didn't make it through my articles to become a chartered accountant. So you may question my skills with numbers a bit, but I have been adding up some of these numbers, and I think we may have reached a significant target.
Is it time?
I think it's time.
All right. May I please ask Minister Patel to please join His Excellency on stage, Minister Patel, because we are at a very poignant point of these announcements. We heard the President earlier on giving us our report card of what we've achieved, and it looks like we are now there with this last announcement. So ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you what happens at this point. If we add up all the numbers for the past 5 years up until this very point, I have the pleasure to let you know that we have officially reached our 5-year investment target set by President Ramaphosa back in 2018 of 1.2 trillion rands. Yeah. Here we go.
wow.
Keep it going. 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 Okay, Tammy, I'm not missing this photo opportunity. Come.
Oh,
let's
no, I
grab
wanna be a
picture.
part
Wait,
of it
Minister,
too.
before you go. Wait. Let's take a pic. Let's take a pic.
So Andile said he doesn't want his grandchildren to not know he was
No.
part of this moment, so he wants a picture.
One day I'll be old and gray.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you, Mr. President. You must stay.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much. We haven't reached the end of the pledges yet. That was just a significant moment.
So you know you
because
owe me,
it was
right?
Attached. What do I owe you?
Big money for that.
Big money.
Okay, we'll talk off stage, no problem.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there's also other companies in other industries that have contributed past the 1.2 trillion rand mark. Many of these companies are in the industrial sector, and they're investing in renewable energy solutions that increase sustainability.
So Toyota is investing 1 billion rand in renewable energy for their automotive production plants in Gauteng and in KwaZulu-Natal.
Well done, Toyota.
ArcelorMittal is investing 3 billion rands in solar PV for their steel production facilities in Gauteng.
Thank you, ArcelorMittal. Not small money, President. Great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also tell you, some of the beauty of investments is all about new industries. So for the first time here at the SA Investment Conference, Mr. President, we are welcoming investments in the green hydrogen sector. Quite a unique opportunity we've got in this country. And let me tell you, Rheinmetall Denel Munition from Germany are investing 251 million rands in a solar farm, a mobile green hydrogen production unit, and expanding their defense-related facilities in the Western Cape and in Gauteng. Not only do we have German investors, we also have investors from the United Kingdom. And here I'm specifically referring to the Hive Group from the UK. They are investing 105 billion rand also in a green hydrogen and green ammonia production facility in Kruger in the National Park. In the Eastern Cape, the first of its kind in South Africa.
Oh, Angela. Nice one, partner. We now move on to the next sector, advanced materials, chemicals, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals sector. In these sectors, we have 9 pledges. Afro Zonke, a black industrialist, is investing in 1.5 billion rands in the establishment of a chlor-alkali plant in Gauteng.
I think this deserves a standing ovation for a black industrialist. Well done, sir. Well done. These numbers, they can roll off your tongue. But when you think about a young man like this to have achieved what he's done, it's truly amazing. So
is that the kind of big money you wanted from me?
Yeah, and I like it in that color, black. It's really, really nice. All right, moving on though, back to Germany. Fuchs from Germany is investing 218 million rand in further phases of their lubricant manufacturing plant in Gauteng. Thank you, ma'am.
Is this the First Lady on stage, right?
I think it might be.
Come on,
And
louder!
Yes.
We've got Oil Spill Excellence, also a black industrialist, is investing 61.7 million in a biotechnology manufacturing facility in Limpopo.
Limpopo.
Next, we have Abangobi Packaging, another black industrialist, is investing 80 billion rands in the production of medical-grade packaging at their factory in Gauteng.
Abangobi.
Abangobi, kind of like my name, Noma Tamsanga.
Bangoba.
I'm super excited to announce this one. You'll hear why. I'll go louder at that part. So Evergreen Latex A woman-run company is investing 200 million rands in the production of medical gloves.
Yes, man. Wow. Next up is another black industrialist who's won many awards in the past, BT Industrial. They're investing 523 million rand in sustainable plastics manufacturing and syringe production in Gauteng. Making this a habit, you know. Cipla from India is also investing 55 million rand in the further expansion of their pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities across South Africa. Cipla?
Fantastic.
Our president knows how to take pictures, eh?
I know. Maybe let me just alert everybody. If you're coming to take a picture, we request that you please take off your name tag. It makes it easier so that you don't have your name tag showing in the picture.
Or you can keep it on so that the president tells you to take it off, because that would be cool. Okay, don't listen to me. Please listen to her. Sticking with our multinationals all the way from the United States of America, Procter & Gamble are also making their fourth investment announcement since the start of the investment mobilization drive. They will be investing 130 million rand in the further expansion of feminine care and other facilities in Gauteng.
Medicana is investing 121 million in a medical cannabis grow pod facility in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah. Back home. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move it on now to the food and beverage industry. In this sector, we have three exciting investments to announce. Heineken Beverages, if you are a fan like me, you really should applaud a little bit louder. Heineken Beverages from the Netherlands is investing 15.5 billion rands in the expansion of their breweries and beverage manufacturers lines right here, also through their acquisition of the Distel Group.
Now I feel the absolute pressure to say, if you're a fan like me, for the following one. The South African Breweries is investing 5.8 billion in expansion of their brewing plants across the country.
There we go.
I got you.
Apparently I'm not getting free beer from SAB.
But I am. The RCL Group is investing 620 million in their Rainbow Chicken facility in KwaZulu-Natal. This definitely deserves a round of applause. I'm a fan of chicken.
So between the three investments, we're starting with a beer, then we're having some chicken, and then we close with a beer.
Or a cider.
Or a cider, absolutely. I mean, Distel, SAB, yeah. Thank you very much so far to all of the companies that have come on stage. We really appreciate, of course, your commitments. Now we're moving on to infrastructure, property, and logistics. In this particular category, of course, as you all know, this is an industry that's quite critical for economic growth. There are 7 investments in this sector to highlight. So I'm going to go pretty quickly. I'm going to start with Sunrail, our very own Sunrail. Through the National Roads Agency, they are investing 19.7 billion rand in the construction of roads, bridges, and other critical transport infra.
Unfortunately, for the next pledge, there is no representative that is present today, but I'm going to read it so we can acknowledge them. That's HR Matters Property. They're investing 16 million rand in a commercial property project development for warehouse and logistics purposes in KwaZulu-Natal. So please give them a round of applause, but they're not here today. We then have Serenity Hills, who is investing 800 million in KwaZulu-Natal in the development of an eco estate with over 600 units and a range of amenities, including a driving range, clubhouse, frail care center, wedding venue, conference center, and of course, restaurants, something you and I like.
Yeah. I heard driving range. That's all I heard. Rennie Shaw is investing 500 million rand in a mixed-use coastal precinct down in KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you. Staying on the coastal, beautiful, wonderful province of KwaZulu-Natal.
That's because it's
where
your
all
home.
the people that are great come from.
Because it's his
The
home.
Elan Group is investing a further 50 million rand in the Blythedale Coastal Resort. Thank you, Elan.
And Global Business Innovation Solution is investing 150 million rand in the Royal Shakaland Resort and Eco Village in KwaZulu-Natal.
Another lady.
Now we come back to my hometown, Gauteng. The Waterfall Management Company is investing a further 350 million in the waterfall development.
This year, we are also welcoming a number of investments in the construction of social infrastructure, most notably student housing, low-cost mixed-use developments that is filling an important gap in the market, Mr. President. And this time around, we have 7 investments, starting up with Buhle Bezwe Property. They are investing 386 million rands in the Hospital Street social housing complex in KwaZulu-Natal. Following them, down in the Western Cape, we have DCI Community Housing, also investing 458 million rand in the Goodwood social housing development.
This is actually representing the Western Cape. So Western Cape, here you are. That's the development in the Western Cape. The Housing Hub is investing 450 million rand in the Mohlakeng social housing development in Gauteng.
Yeah, well done.
Midrand Heights is investing 164 million rand in a social housing complex in Gauteng.
Well done.
Do we have a representative from Midrand Heights before we move on? No, unfortunately, they're not here today. The Sefako Makgato Health Sciences University is investing 245 million rands in student housing in Gauteng.
Thank you, sir. I like that. You hear that? My chancellor. My chancellor. I like that. Again, Limpopo people. That's what they do. Staying on the theme of universities, Mr. President, the Northwest University is also making a big investment of its own in student accommodation, 235 million rand for their campuses in the Northwest province. Not to be outshined, University of Western Cape, 375 million rand in student accommodation at their campus in the Western Cape.
I don't think we have a representative from the University of Western Cape. So now we'll move on to the last sector for the morning session. Of course, there's going to be more pledges later on this afternoon, and that is Development Finance Institutes. A number of multilateral organizations have also made pledges to help fund investment in South Africa. We have 4 such investment commitments that have been made in this category. So first to come up, the New Development Bank is making a further commitment of 25.9 billion rand towards projects in South Africa.
Yes, sir.
it gives me absolute great pleasure to announce the next one for obvious reasons. The Industrial Development Corporation will facilitate 11 billion rand investment spent on the new capital goods in the country.
Well done, IDC. I think they're busy working because
Yep,
they're the
they are.
sponsors of today.
Yep, they are.
All right, and two more to go. Access Bank is based out in Nigeria, as you might know. They are committing 1.42 billion rands towards funding projects in South Africa. Old Mutual Infrastructure Investment Managers is also committing 3.2 billion rands for projects in the renewable energy and infrastructure sectors. And in true Old Mutual style, the man is wearing a green tie.
tie.
On brand, as they say.
Yes, that's it. On brand and in brand.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause to all of our investors for this year so far. Mr. President, thank you for joining us. We'll see you later.
See you later.
All right, ladies and gents, I'm going to help us now just go with the flow for the rest of the day. In fact, let me stand next to my co-host. I feel much safer here. What's going to happen now is that we're going to take a tea break. And in fact, this tea break, you're almost grabbing your coffee and your tea, and you're making your way onto the breakaway sessions. Let me tell you how this is going to work. Basically, the next time I see you will be much later in the afternoon, because we're going to be having 3 sections of breakaway sessions, right? Each of these breakaway sessions will be around 40 minutes, and at each slot, there will be 3 breakaway sessions in each slot. So 3 slots, 3 breakaway sessions in each slot. So if you don't know and you haven't checked your app or your program, let me just remind you what that all means. After the 15-minute tea, you will make your way to level 2 of this venue. And in ballroom 1, ballroom 2, and ballroom 3 will be the 3 breakaway sessions that will be taking place. So for the next slot, 15 minutes from now, called that 11:37, there will be digital opportunities in South Africa in breakaway 1, which is in ballroom 1, level 2. There will be agriculture, new products and markets in ballroom 2, also in level 2. And then there will be infrastructure, investment opportunities in South Africa at ballroom 3, level 3. Then we will have a lunch break. Okay, so that lunch break will be announced by the moderators of each of those sessions. We are hoping to save a bit of time by having like a 30-minute lunch break before the next phase of breakaway sessions. These will also be happening on level 2, also in ballroom 1, 2, and 3. The 3 options you've got there after lunch will be manufacturing, deepening supply chains, and building regional value chains. It'll be tourism, digital and creative economy, and then there will also be the just energy transition in South Africa. Straight after that phase of breakaways will be the 3rd one. Same venue, same level. Ballroom 1, 2, and 3 on level 2. The 3 options at that time will be mining, a new partnership for growth, capital markets, facilitating investment in SA and providing access to capital, and then local growth strategies. When those 3 sessions of 3 each are done, because you have to pick one, we will then go for another tea break. The moderators of each session will let you know what time you're expected to come back. After that tea break, you are going back to level 2. You are not coming here. All right? So afternoon tea break, you are staying at level 2. We will be hearing from the African Continental Free Trade Area and what it means for business. So if you are interested in how the agreement may affect your business, we've got His Excellency in the room who will be making a presentation to us. That will be followed by a final panel, and then we'll all go and get ready for dinner, yeah?
Yeah, fantastic. We are being joined by people online. Unfortunately, we are not streaming live from the breakaway sessions, so we will be saying goodbye to everybody who's joining us online. However, please do come back at 4 o'clock, as when we reconvene in the plenary on level 2, we will then go live again. So enjoy your tea break, everybody.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so just one more time, it's 11:24, 15 minutes from now, which is around 11:40. Please make sure that you are at your breakaway. Thank you.